So it's part 3 of lesson 4. We've used the generator. We've played around to see how it runs. So we haven't really done much. All we've done is, the only change we've made is we've passed a different title in our index controller in our main root. So let's try a couple other things. We want to add a new page and a new view. So we want to add a new view and a new URL mapping. Then we want to try making a new controller. And then we'll maybe, if we have time, maybe we could add Bootstrap to the project and then see if we could get it deployed to Heroku. Okay. So first thing is, let's make an about page. So first thing we need to do is we need to handle requests at the URL localhost 3000/about. So we use our router variable that we created up here on line 3, and we want to handle get requests at this URL /about. Now the Express generator, it uses this old syntax. They haven't updated. It still uses the word function. I prefer to use the newer shorthand syntax that we're used to using, request response next, with our fat arrow function. So what do you suppose we should do in here? If we want to load a new view, if we get a request at localhost 3000/about. Yep, res dot what method do we call to load a view? We're already using it on line 7. Right, Maggie. Well, Barak, we use the get here. The router is a get method. When we have a get method at the router, we call res.render. What should we call our view? Yeah, let's call it about. And we also want to pass in a title. Semicolons optional. So when a request comes in, a get request at the URL /about, we want to render a view called about and pass in this title. Okay, let's try it out. So I'll save that. Go back to our site. And now I'm going to go to localhost 3000/about. And we get this. Failed to look up view about in the views directory, right? Because, as Maggie said, it's trying to load a view called about. That's right, Barak. We now have to go and create that. And Barak, what folder do we put that file in? Right. So let's go to views and right click. I'm going to just put in a new file called about.hbs. So we can use our little handlebars or mustache syntax. It's got a title. So if we refresh the browser now that we've created this page in views, our error should go away. So not all that different, again, from using MVC and ASP.NET. We add a method in the controller. The controller loads a view, and then we go and build the view file in the views folder. So adding new pages, which you're going to do in your portfolio, it's basically as simple as what we've just done. You're going to use the generator to make a new project. And then in your index.js, you'll handle the different GET requests. Each one will load a new view. Justin will do that today if we have time. Huh, that is interesting, Nick. So you'll make a few views and you'll map the URLs to the views. Now we want to do something a little more with the About page. Right now we're passing in the title. I'm actually going to put this on another line. But in Express, we can actually pass in multiple values. So let's say we want to pass in a title, but we also want to pass in maybe another variable. I'll call it page text. Here is some info about this project. So we can pass in as in JSON format as many different variables as we want. So if we're querying the database, for example, we might put in like a title, and then we might pass in a whole list of data to be rendered. So we just separate with commas our JSON nodes. So the key names don't need to be in quotes, but the values, if they're strings, should be. So now what would we have to do in our view if we wanted to display the page text like in a paragraph tag? So here's the revised version. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Barak and Rebecca. Yeah, we'll just use the handlebars tags around our page text variable, and we can just wrap it in p tags. So we can pass as many values as we want from the controller to the view. It's one JSON object, and we can just separate with a comma any variables we want to pass. So now when we reload, our title is here and here. Now in your portfolio, you don't have to pass the page content from the controller. You probably want to pass the page titles, but it's also okay to just hard code the actual content, like your project info and contact info. You can just put this stuff right on the page. It's fine. More static content, blah, blah, blah. So now I've got a mixture of dynamic content from the server that I'm rendering in handlebars, and then just regular HTML. So maybe I'll say, here is some dynamic info from the controller. Maybe just change my message. So we'll have two paragraphs. The first paragraph, the content is going to come from the controller. The second paragraph is just static text that's hard-coded right into the view. Right, so at runtime, looks like this. So believe it or not, you actually have everything you need to do the assignment. How long have we been working with Express Generator? Like half an hour? So if you add a form, okay, let's look at what a form looks like. Good question, Maggie. let's look at a repository from last year. Okay. Bear with me for a second. Global. Last year we did a little food app. So we had a foods controller. We had a get method at /add. So when the user went to localhost /food/add, this was authentication code, so don't worry about this. But ultimately, it did res.render, so what we've been doing, it loaded the view called foods add. So this displayed the form. So this is the get method. And we saw this in ASP.NET, right? When we had a create, we had a get, and we had a post. The get displayed the form, the post processed the form submission. So similar in Express. Get renders the form, and then we had a post. So when the user submitted it, we then created a new object from the form and saved to the database with create. So the view looked like this. So under views and foods, here's the add.hbs. Basically just like a regular form with a drop-down list. So we had foods from different countries. So when you were adding a food, you could also pick from the drop-down which country. So we'll kind of do something similar. We can add a project, and we'll make it so we could also add, we could choose a course, right? When you have a project, you could tag it to a course. So this is where we're going. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, I was just wondering because if you had like a contact form and then you filled it out, having that information stored so that you'd get that email with that contact information.
Right. So you would need a get and a post.
Okay.
Like if at contact, you'd have a get that would display the contact HBS, and then you'd have a post method that would process it and send it.
Okay.
So you're on the right track. Okay, so everything you need to do your portfolio, so you should have about, 4 methods in your index controller and 4 views. The index one is already here, and then you can just add the code, style it, put in whatever content you like. And it's fine if you want to just hard code your content in the HTML. That's okay. So 215, okay, I want to make a new controller. And so let's make a controller. So under controllers, you're going to make a new JavaScript file. And let's call this, let me think. Let's call this projects. So this will be the main controller in the site. It'll handle all the logic for adding, editing, deleting, updating projects. So we want to require Express and enable Express routing. So we're going to require Express. And then we'll use the Express router. And at the bottom, we want to make public. So exactly the same code that we have in the 2 controllers that the generator created. It just used var instead of const. But we'll use const instead. So here's projects. So now we want a get handler at the URL localhost/projects. So again, we're going to use router.get. And our same express parameters, request, response, next. And we want to load a new view that we're going to create. So we're going to call res.render. This time, our view, we want to put it in a subfolder. We're going to create, again, just like ASP.NET had, inside of views, we want a subfolder for all of the project views. We'll say our title is equal to my projects. So here's our very simple projects controller. We'll add to this over the next few weeks. Eventually, we'll be able to do, probably take us a couple of weeks, but we'll be able to do full CRUD operations where we can add, edit, and delete projects. So all of the methods will be in here. Much like our ASP.NET controllers, but we have to build them manually. There's no scaffolding of that code like there is in .NET. So we'll build this out one piece at a time. We'll do it slowly over a couple of weeks. So we've built our projects controller. That's all we're going to do with it for today. What would our next step be in order to make this functional? So we've got a projects controller. When we get requests at localhost/projects, it's going to load this view. Right. We need to make in views. First, we need to make the projects subfolder. And then we're going to make an index view inside. So under views, let's make a new directory called projects. So again, Visual Studio did this for us when we would scaffold a controller with views. It automatically made a subfolder with the same name as the controller in views. In Node, we've got to do it manually. So I'm going to make my projects. And then I'll make a new file. So I'm also going to call it index.hbs. So we have two views called index, but one is in the root. This one is going to go inside the projects folder. So I'll call it index.hbs. And I'll just put on an H1 for now, where we can display the title. Eventually, this page is going to display a list, much like the index views in .NET. When we go to localhost/projects, we want to see an HTML table that shows all the projects in the database. For today, it's just a static page. We're not working with the database yet. So create project subdirectory, create index.hbs, and just the same H1 we've put in our other views. So it should display this title that says My Projects. So let's try it out. We've got a new controller. When we have a GET request in the root of the controller, it will load projects/index. It'll load this view. We don't need to specify the extension. Our app already knows that all the views are going to be HBS. When we set the project up, we can see here the view engine is HBS. So if we want to try this, we can go to localhost 3000/projects, and we get good old Mr. 404, every web developer's favorite. How come? We made a controller. The controller loads the view. Why did we get 404? When I went to /users, it works. Good guess, Barak. We don't actually need the projects.hbs because remember, this is just calling a route. It's not loading a file directly. It's not like HTML. Remember, we're using MVC. So it's trying to call supposed to call our project's controller, and the controller loads the view. But how come it works for users and doesn't work for projects? Give you a hint. Has something to do with the question, Maria, that you asked a little while ago. How come it doesn't, it understands, no, there is a controller. Here's the controller. It's here. You're getting warm, Maria. Here's a hint. Look in your app.js file. How come the index controller works, the user's controller works, but the project's controller gives us 404 not found? Thank you, Maggie. Because these mappings are here direct automatically, right? When we use the generator, it automatically references the index and users controller on lines 7 and 8. And on 22 and 23, it maps the URLs. So any URL that starts with users is handled by the users controller. So Maggie, what do we need on line 9? We need to add 2 lines to this file. So what should line 9 be?
Is it just like it's a project controller and then equals requires?
You got it. So we have to link. So this doesn't happen manually. We've got to do this. Sorry, it doesn't happen automatically. We've got to do it manually. Okay, so we've got to reference it just the same way our first 2 controllers are automatically referenced. And then what do we need to do? Yeah, on line 25, thank you, Rudia, app.use, thanks, Rebecca, you got it. So any URLs that start with the word projects, we're going to direct these requests to be handled by the project's controller. This should fix our problem. So when we create our own controllers, we have to handle the URL mapping. It's not like in ASP.NET that it's automatic. In ASP.NET, if we add a project's controller, any URL that starts with /projects will automatically be handled here. In Express, you've got to set this up manually in app.js. Ta-da. So we'll have to map every specific route. So next week, when we build an add a project form, we'll need a get method at project/add in the project's controller. And then we'll have to build under views projects, we'll have to build add.hbs so it can load the form so we can start populating our MongoDB with projects. So in your assignment, you don't actually have to create a separate controller. For assignment 1, you can just use the index controller that the generator automatically builds. And you can just add the different routes here, you know, about, projects, contact, and you can just make your own views right in the route. For the app we're building together, we need this separate projects controller. You don't have to have a separate controller in your assignment. It's not required. You can do it if you want to, but you don't need to complete the assignment. You can just use index.js.
question.
Sure.
Is the layout.hbs, is that similar to the layout shared file like in
It's
ASP.NET?
exactly what it is.
Okay.
Let's modify it. So Justin, I want to come to your question. Why don't we add Bootstrap? In fact, not only generic Bootstrap, but why don't we go and grab a Bootstrap theme? We can add it in here to layout. And we can even add a quick nav bar. So I'm going to go here. Let's go to Bootswatch. So Bootswatch has some free themes for Bootstrap. I'll put the link in the chat. So you can pick any theme you like. I'll maybe pick this one. So I'm going to click on download. I'm going to download the Minified Bootstrap, and I'll show you where I want to put it. So I'm going to save it. So in Node, Project Tracker, inside of Public, Style Sheets. So we've already got the default style sheet that the generator gives us. And again, you can make any changes you want in that style sheet. I'm going to download it here. Bootstrap theme from, I'll give credit. So Yeti Bootstrap theme, right? So I'm not taking credit for this as my own. So it's in Style Sheets. I don't know why this is in single quotes, which the generator gives me. Scott would be very offended by this. So I'll make sure to properly format. Okay, so now we've got, let's see. All right, so now we've got our Bootstrap theme. And we can use Bootstrap. Let's add a quick navigation bar and then we'll publish it. Won't take us long. I think I've actually put the Bootstrap 4 navbar from W3 Schools. It's actually right on Blackboard. There's a couple spaces in the tags we'll need to clean up. Here, I'll put the link in the chat. We'll go get it from there instead. Blackboard kind of broke some of the HTML formatting. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to grab, I think I just want the basic logo. Sorry, the basic nav bar. So I'm going to grab that and copy it. And I'm going to put it above the body. And again, I'll put in the source. Bootstrap or navbar from So let's see how this looks now. So above our page body, we've got our shared navigation bar. If we wanted to add a footer, we could do that too. Maybe we'll do that later in the semester. So let's see how this looks. Okay. So let's see. Let's modify our links a little bit. Our second link can go to About. Our third link can go to Project. And we want our navbar brand. So let's just see, we want to add this link over on the left. I'll take out that first nav item. So this will just be COMP2106. We'll just call it actually Project Tracker. And the link here is just a slash. We may reformat this some more, but probably good enough for now. Here's the whole nav bar. You could use other classes if you want the dark. We could anchor it up at the top, etc. Good enough for now. So now we can go to the About page, Projects, or Home. So it's a little more work than doing this in ASP.NET, but it's not that much work. So the last step we're going to do is deploy this to Heroku. So Heroku is a cloud service. Node runs really well on it. It's provided, Heroku's owned by Salesforce. So we want to create a free account on Heroku. I want to push the project to GitHub and then connect my Heroku site to my Git repository, much like we did in Azure. So the first step is I need to get our project up on GitHub. So I'm going to go to GitHub and make a new project for starters. Actually, the other thing I want is I want the Git Ignore file, because we don't want, how big are our dependencies? Yeah, 6 megs of dependencies. So I'm going to actually copy the Git Ignore file from our other project. And you go to my Winter 21. And I'm going to copy my Git Ignore, but it's also available on Blackboard. So you can download it if you need it. So I'm going to put my Git Ignore file here so the node modules don't get copied. Where is the Git Ignore file? I will show you. It's on Blackboard. In Weekly Learning and Tools and Resources. Here it is. So you can download this file into your project tracker. You can just right click and save the link as. I could have done this as well. It will download, but just make sure you save it as just the name .gitignore inside your project tracker. It's not absolutely critical to have the Git Ignore for Node, but it's recommended. I'm going to create a new repository on GitHub. is our in-class Node Express MongoDB app. I'll make my repository public. I'm not going to create a README for Git Ignore. I'll create a README later on. And the Git Ignore I've already got. So I'll just create the repository. And I will run all my favorite commands in the terminal. So I'm going to stop my server. I'm going to initialize Git by running git init, which creates an empty local repository. I'm going to add all my files with git add space dot. I'll make a new commit. So this is lesson 4, app setup with generator. I'll do git remote add origin. So I want to connect the local Git repository to my GitHub repository online. So I'll just copy the URL here, or I can copy it from the address bar, doesn't matter. I will paste it in. So you'll do git remote add origin. So username / repo name. So make sure you replace in the link I put in the chat, replace the username and the repository name with the full proper URL. And then lastly, I will push. Git push from the origin to the master branch. And now my code should be up on GitHub without my node modules. So here it is. Hung, when you say copy, do you mean like drag and drop? Oh. What, sorry, what, could you clarify what you meant by copy?
So the line when you say git remote add origin?
Right, yes. You can
There is
copy, you can copy the URL. That's right.
Yeah. So so the whole line with the the URL is inside of the
Right. Yep, you can copy
GitHub.
it from there. That's right. Thank you.
Yeah.
So once your code is up on GitHub, we want to jump over to Heroku, and it's just like a very short registration form. So I'll give you the link. So you just go to Heroku.com. Link is in the chat. You can sign up. All they want is your name and email address. You don't have to supply a company. And they will, you can pick Node, and it will just email you a confirmation link. It happens right away. So just sign up at Heroku.com for free. They let you host up to 5 websites permanently for free. So go ahead and sign up. And then check your email and just verify your account. That's interesting, Hung. I'd have to look at why. It's not a big deal. If the node modules are uploaded, it's okay. Don't panic. Not a big deal. So I'm going to sign into Heroku. So you can also, many of you, if your team for Project Studio, if you've chosen to use Node, then you can host it on Heroku. The Heroku interface is really simple and clean. It's a lot easier to use than Azure, to be honest with you. So once you log in, should just be able to create a new app. You give your app a name, much like in Azure, so it will run under the herokuapp.com subdomain. So I'm going to call this project. Tells me it's available. Pick Node as your primary development language, but it doesn't really matter, Maria. But Node.js should be in the list. So we create an app and give it a name. Once I submit this, this will create a new empty application that runs at COMP2106 projects.herokuapp.com. And then we can go into the deployment settings and we can connect it to our GitHub repository. So I'll click create. And oh, I need to delete something. Okay, let me go back. I can get rid of an old one. This was me testing a student last year who was having a problem. I will just delete it. And I can delete, probably need to delete this one too. So maximum of 5. Okay, I'll go through that again. New app. Which somebody has taken. Not exactly. I mean, it is a cloud service in a way, Maggie. So some similarities, yes. There are some similarities. So I've created the app now. That's okay, Hung. No problem. And I want to deploy from GitHub. You can deploy directly from the command line from your local machine, but I want to deploy from GitHub. And now it wants me to pick my repository name. So I'll search. Now I'm already logged in to my GitHub account. It shows my avatar and GitHub username. It'll prompt you to log into GitHub here. You need to grant Heroku access to your GitHub account, but you only have to do this once. It was the same in Azure. So it found my new repository and I just click connect. It asked what branch to deploy. I'm going to enable automatic deployment. Enable if you want continuous integration, meaning every time we push a change to GitHub, we want Heroku to update. So I'm going to enable that. And then I can just click deploy. So it's going to go and fetch our code from GitHub. It's going to read package.json. So it installs the 62 dependencies listed in package.json. Says my app was deployed successfully. There we go. So now our app is deployed through GitHub to Heroku. So if this was the portfolio, if this was assignment 1, all I'd really have to do is flesh out the links and the content and design. But actually setting up the project and deploying it is pretty simple. So you do have 2 weeks to do this. I'd like to see a couple of commits at least by next week's class. There's no other homework. There's no quiz. There's no lab. Let me just make sure of that. If there is, I will remove it. I don't want you. Lab 2, I'm taking out. So you have nothing for next week. Okay. So you're going to use the generator to create a new project and start working on your assignment. Due in 2 weeks. Oops. Okay, that's Justin, that's fine. Nick, that's good. I'm glad that was clear. So you're basically just taking what we did today and just fleshing it out as a personal portfolio site. If I can think of any other places that I should add here, I will add them and I'll take a screenshot of this and share it. Okay, are there any questions before we end for today? I know we did a lot, but what we did using the generator is sort of the foundation of everything else we're going to be doing in the course. So I didn't want to go too fast through it. Next week, we'll look at incorporating MongoDB and the model piece. All right, folks. Well, that is all. We got a long weekend coming up, so we have no class on Monday. So I will see all of you next week, but I'd encourage you to get started before next week's class on your assignment.